that container is taken back.
Kanata found out about a local innovation developed by one Mutuma Morioki, who, with a 1 million shillings grant from Haifa International's Ayute program, developed the device.
This is one of the solutions that we provide, the solar trap, where the farmers now we are able to help the farmers eradicate the force-codling moth through the use of solar, in this case.
Included in this device is a 5-watt solar panel, which traps light from the sun to charge the device batteries. The panel also powers several sensors that detect and isolate pests. The LED light bulb works to attract specific pests, especially the destructive false-coding moth FCM. At night, the LED light turns on to attract pests, which then fall into the soapy water below and are trapped from escaping.
It's the way we've designed it is it's an industry use application where it can get rained on, it can get all the dust, can get everything, and it will still function properly in the farm. In the households, it can't work because maybe you might ask about mosquitoes. We've designed it more for the agricultural industry.
Farmers who have used the system say the device can reduce pests by 80%. With plans including the incorporation of global positioning systems. Since 2023, over 200 farmers have benefited from the technology. Morioki says the device costs 30,000 shillings with a lifespan of 5 years, where farmers can return the gadget to the innovator to be repurposed. Morioki's dream is to expand his operations countrywide to benefit more farmers who are battling pests. But for now, the LED lights continue to illuminate in Meru County, with every flicker giving farmers more hope.
The power of voltaics applied not only for water solutions. This is applying local solutions for local problems. Alanauko for Tech One.
Thank you very much. We're coming to you live from Jivanji Gardens right here at the heart of Nairobi City on a very critical day when the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, John Badi, will later on this afternoon be presenting the 4.8 trillion shillings budget for the 2026-2027 financial year. Now, this is a very crucial budget because it's coming at a time when Kenyans are, of course, battling with a lot of concerns, including the high cost of living. And many are watching to see what will be in that budget. And, you know, we are now walking around Nairobi City to to hear from Kenyans what they would like to see in that budget, what they would like to hear, to see being incorporated by CS Mbadi. And of course, behind me, there's a group of members of the Bunge la Mwananchi who are going out to talk to us about the budget and tell us what they want. Ndugu, habari yako, tueleze, uko live katika KBC TV, budget inasomwa baadaye mchana wa leo. Unayefahamu vipi hiyo bajeti na nini ambacho unatarajia kutokana nayo?
First, my name is Willy Maina, a spokesperson, Chama cha Katiba of Fraternity and Bunge la Mwananchi. First, let me say this finance budget has enriched the common Mwananchi with a lot of credits. It really looks on the creditor more than the livelihoods. Sababu nikisema hivyo, and again, I feel that the Mwananchi wa kawaida is limited to access of information. The finance budget stipulated to 4.8 trillion, that margin for really. Na tunaongelelea about inflation, what the government has said about from 9% to 2.5%. It doesn't really match in this finance bill. First, nikiaddress about the information, I feel that as Kenyans, we are limited to provision, access, transparency and accountability when it comes to Article 108, Section 1, Article 196, Chapter 1, Section 1, A, ambapo inaongelelea provision to access of information, and also Article 231, A, whereby it speaks about about the public funds and the use of funds consecutively together with the public participation. On this finance bill, I don't think we had a very good participation, public participation. The other day we had John Mbadi hapa kwa Bunge la Mwananchi. Tukamuuliza maswali kadha wa kadha kuhusu about hii finance bill. But the only thing I can tell, alikuwa hapa kusafisha jina. Why? Tulimuuliza on prioritization and the government capitation. Mmeangalia kuhusu about prioritize security sana. Kuhusu kuliko mambo ya education. To the extent yesterday, he came out clear and addressed about the education system, because the information from the Ministry of Education, there are more than 200 schools ambazo saizi zimefungwa. I think more than 3,000 students wametumwa nyumbani. This is a crisis. Why? He came out loud and said, members, Kenyans of goodwill, together with the clergy, together with the social community and the welfare, tukuje tuangalie maneno ya education and how we can project on the wellness of it.
So all right. So unasema kwamba unataka katika this budget you'd like education to be prioritized.
Education to be prioritized because there's a crisis in the Ministry of Education.
Fantastic. And of course, we still have many other members here of Bunge la Mwananchi who would also like to, share their concerns or give their opinions about this year's budget. So, brother, good morning. You're live on KBC TV. Tell us what you think about the 2026-2027 budget.
Okay, good morning. My name is Abut. Good morning. My name is Abut. I am here to suggest about this budget of today. We know today we have 3 Eastern Africa countries that they are presenting their budget. We have Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. And we know as far from now, Kenya is the only one leading on the budget, 4.8 trillion, while Tanzania is 2.8 trillion and Uganda 2.6 trillion. So jenye ningeprefer kwa hii budget ya leo. Vile ndugu yangu amesema hapa mambo na education. We know kwa education tumeona kuna shida mingi kwa education. Badala ya pesa mingi watumwe mahali pa education, tunaona tunapelekewa pesa mingi kwa State House, ambapo tunakataa kama raia wa kawaida, maana tumefinywa kabisa. Number 2, ningeona hii budget wangeprefer mambo na healthy. Mambo na healthy, maana sides healthy kuna mali penye madaktari, unapata madaktari wamekoma juu hakuna pesa huko, hakuna madawa huko, but there is expenses enye unapata still president and move from one country to another using a lot of taxes. Number 3 jenye ningeomba kwa hii budget is that opposition, and I am not here to support one term or 2 term, but opposition and those who are in government, they have to come together right now to think about the Wanjiku. Not that everything they make as a politic everything. So the thing that I am prepared today is that all politicians to come together and support this wananchi.
Fantastic. Of course, we'll be having just one more member of, this Bunge la Mwananchi also coming here to tell us what they also think about this year's budget. Songia, karibu ndugu.
Majina naitwa Emmanuel. Mimi kwa hii bajeti mimi janibamba sana. Shabambika sana. Ndio maana nimeamua kuzungumza kwa lugha ya Kiswahili ndio kila mtu anaielewa kwa hii nchi yetu. Sasa mimi kwa hii bajeti ya 4.8 trillion shabambika sana kwa maana
ni nini ambacho unafikiria kijafanywa?
Wamefinya sana mambo kama ya sekta ya masomo ya elimu sana. Ukiangalia pale shule zinachomwa, asipambi sana, watoto wezi wanakufa. Masule yamechomwa. Atubambiki. Mbadi anafaa kutuambia yeye nini amefanya kwa hiyo sekta yake ya CS since aingie kule. Atuonyeze ni nini ya produce, ni nini amefanya. Si kutusomea budget tu peke yake. Sisi tunataka tuone ni nini amefanya, ni nini amekifanya step to step, amestabilize hiyo nini hiyo city ya treasury. Hiyo ndio nilikuwa na maoni yangu.
Well, as you can hear from the members of the Bunge la Mwananchi here at Jivanji, two things are coming out clearly, that education sector and health sector, but also information about what is in the budget and how it's going to benefit Mwananchi. Those are what they have to say here at Bunge la Mwananchi. Of course, we will be crossing to other areas in the city to also see what Nairobi residents have to say about that. So back to you in studio.
It's a good morning to you. It's Thursday, the 11th day of June 2026. It's budget day across East Africa, where we have Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, as well as Tanzania presenting their fiscal policies for the year 2026-2027. And if I can give you some factual backgrounds based on facts, Kenya is presenting the biggest budget in East Africa, which is about 1.5%, 1.5 times bigger than the budget of Tanzania, while it is also 1.7 times bigger than the budget of Uganda, and 7 times bigger than the budget of Rwanda. Those are the numbers we're talking about. It's 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings, and the question is, how is the government going to bankroll the 2026-2027 financial year budget? That is the elephant in the room. And remember, we have our reporters on the ground. We've just talked to members of the Bunge la Mwananchi. And of course, Geoffrey Wahungu is keeping tabs with the residents of Nairobi. He will be traversing the county, trying to give us a bit of the reactions from members of the public. We also have our teams at the National Assembly. They'll be talking to members of Parliament and, of course, capturing the budget presentation by Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, John Mbandi. We also have a team at the National Treasury whereby they will be very keen to capture the briefcase movement. I've always called it the briefcase movement, where the Cabinet Secretary will come out accompanied by National Treasury mandarins to flash that historical briefcase. Oh yeah, it's going to be a moment. And we shall be looking out to see whether are they going to walk all the way to Parliament or they are going to ride on their lemurs. It's going to be a moment to watch. I told you the numbers are out, 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings. Last year, it was about 4.2 trillion Kenya shillings. And we know the Kenya Revenue Authority has been struggling a little bit to meet the target, missing last year's target by about 50 billion Kenya shillings. And this year, the target is even more ambitious. They are supposed to collect, listen to these, 3.5 trillion Kenya shillings. A Herculean task, if you ask me, but there are some various strategies that the taxman is putting in place to ensure that they broaden the tax base as well as deepen the tax base as well. And we'll be probing those strategies and asking ourselves, are they meant to hurt Kenyans? And are they cushioning Kenyans from the harsh economic times that they are experiencing because of what we call exogenous shocks? Oh yeah, we know the war between the US, Israel, as well as Iran is upending the global energy sector. And this is having an impact on Kenya. Remember, fuel prices, the retail fuel prices have gone up by almost 30 shillings in the last 2 months. Think about that. And this is really pinching Kenyans economically. And the question is, what do we need to do to move forward from here? My name is O'Brien Kimani. We are live from Broadcasting House. Time is coming up to 10:20. We are going to be here all the way up to 2:30 when we take you to the National Assembly so that we can listen in to the conversation that will be taking place there. And I gave you some very interesting statistics about the East African Community budget policy statements, which are going to be issued this afternoon. And of course, we shall be giving you a bit of what is happening. And you know, the whole of this week, including the whole of last week, we've been talking about nothing more, nothing much but the budget. And on top of that, there's something else up the sleeves here. The FIFA 2026 World Cup is going down today. Yeah. And I got some big news for you because it's happening here on Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. We are going to be live from the three countries of Canada, Mexico, as well as United States, where the biggest global football showcase will be taking place. There are opening matches between South Africa and Mexico. And we shall be live and giving you all the details in regard to that. Remember to watch the big match right here on KBC Channel 1. And you know for sure we have always been your true sports partner. I have a team of experts in studio who are going to guide us through this conversation. And starting on my extreme what? This is my extreme left. Yeah, it's your right. We have Leonard Kafava. He has always been here helping us to put facts and figures into context. Leonard, thank you very much indeed for joining us. He's a public policy expert, and we appreciate your time this morning.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
And then next to me we have Christine Derito. She's a tax advisor at Ichiban Tax and Business Advisory. Asante sana, Derito, for joining us this morning. And then next to Derito we have engineer. Yeah, we have an engineer on the show. This is Engineer Humphrey Indire. He's a director, Climate Finance and Energy Transition. Engineer, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
As well. And next to engineer, we have CPA David Kewara. He's a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. CPA, asante sana for your time. I just want to pick your brains on what are your expectations today? What do you expect the CS for National Treasury to tell the nation the moment he stands before the National Assembly?
Thank you. I think when we are looking at the speech that we're expecting today, we're getting to see what is the breakdown of that 4.8 trillion. So what we have right now is the budget policy statement that was released in February that gave the ceiling at 4.82 trillion. But then we now need to see from the CS how exactly are we doing this allocation of this 4.8 trillion. And from what we have what is called the consolidated fund. We know that around 1.5 trillion is going into that fund to just be able to settle our obligations in terms of debt, as well as be able to settle our obligations for pension payments. We also have an allocation to the counties. We had the Senate have an agreement with the governors yesterday, and they settled at around 428 billion. So that brings our budget to around 2 trillion so far. Then we have the 1 trillion that goes to salaries and recurrent expenditure for payment of salaries within the national government and other institutions. That brings us to around 3 trillion. Then we have an additional allocation now for what we call what is there for development and what is there for basic payments of recurrent expenditures, expenses, and appropriations. Mm-hmm. So that is how we are getting to 4.8 trillion. And so you see, for that additional 1 trillion is what is going to be allocated to, let's say, education, to health, to security, and all that. So we need to be able to see from the CS how is that breakdown coming in and how is it going to be able to feed into the Mwananchi's pocket. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Caroline, thank you very much for helping us put those numbers into that perspective. What do you expect the CS to tell Kenyans when he stands before Parliament this afternoon?
I think Christine has pretty well summed it up. I don't want to add any further to what she said. I totally agree with what she said. For me, I want to see whether the CS has taken into consideration the public participation input that had been ongoing until at some point in May. I want to see whether he will address the issue of VAT, the movement. You know, the way VAT tends to be moved around and about, basically to fill up the budget deficit, from VAT exempt to standard VAT to zero-rated VAT. on various inputs. And my bias, as you know, is always the aviation industry. And we have lobbied, even as an industry, to have the CS give a predictable tax code when it comes to VAT, because every year, especially when it comes to aviation, the CS will always come up and say that they want to add 16% VAT on aircraft parts, on the purchase of aircrafts, and even maintenance of aircraft. And that becomes a constraint in the industry, in the aviation industry, because it makes Kenya uncompetitive. So I'll be looking to see whether this input has been taken into consideration and whether the CS now has adjusted and taken into account the contribution that has been adduced for public participation. Yeah.
What do you plan to do if those inputs are not captured? Will you go to the streets?
Not at all. I mean, going to the streets has been an exercise in futility, as we have seen, because quite obviously we are constrained as a nation. We are heavily in debt as a nation, hence the kind of budget that we have at the moment. As Christina said, nearly half of the budget is actually going towards debt service and the payment of debt service in terms of interest and payment of the principal. So we are constrained as a country, and the other way of doing things is to default on that debt, which has implications, which has major implications on the economy of the country. So we will not be taken to the streets. We'll just figure out a way of lobbying further so that this VAT input on aircraft or aviation services is obviated from the budget.
Very well. Yeah. And of course, the images that you can see on your screen, that is outside the National Assembly. We are talking about, I mean, not National Assembly, but National Treasury. That is at the junction of Taifa Road and Harambee Avenue, where you have Kenyatta International Convention Center on one side and Vigilance House on the other. And of course, National Treasury is sandwiched between the Central Bank of Kenya building, yes, and the Kenyatta International Convention Center. And anytime starting from 2:30 p.m. we would expect to see the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury emerging with a budget briefcase surrounded by members of or critical members or top executives at the ministry, as well as members of the public, to head to the National Assembly to present the budget. We are back in studio. I just want to find out from CPA Kiwara. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers, you know, and Christine has managed to put them, you know, correctly. You're talking about 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings, Kenya Revenue Authority, with a target of 3.6 Kenya trillion shillings, and a budget deficit of about 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings. The National Treasury plans to borrow about 225 billion shillings from external sources and almost 1 trillion shillings from internal sources. This has always been a challenge in the past because it has what we call the crowd out effect, and more so affecting the small and medium enterprises. Why is the National Treasury so keen on raiding the domestic market to finance the budget, bearing in mind that they know too well the impact of this?
Thank you, Brian. Actually, the 4.8 trillion budget is quite ambitious, but we as Kenyans, we should not be excited because we are correcting more. We are planning to correct more and to borrow more, which is quite contradictory. And my major concern, as you have said, is about the budget deficit. We are talking of 13 trillion, the current debt we are having. 1.3 trillion goes to interest on loan every year, and this is set to grow as we borrow more. So actually, what I would say is that these countries should not be contracting any other extra bob every year. So this is the time now we should be having a balanced budget where we should only be planning to spend what we can correct, the 3.6 we are talking about. So when the budget is planning to borrow a whole 1 trillion from the local market, that means that definitely, as you have said, the private sector will be crowded out. We are going to see the government competing with the private sector in terms of borrowing. Definitely, when the demand for cash is high, the interest on loan will go high, and that definitely the ripple effect will be on the private sector. Remember, we correct our taxes from income tax, and part of it is payee. Payee is based on those people who have been employed, and as we know, companies borrow to expand businesses, and therefore employ more people. And when they employ more people, that means government collect more taxes in terms of pay and even income tax. So definitely, when we borrow, when the budget is planning to borrow, that will have a negative impact on our economy. And I would urge, because now I know now at the level we are right now, the budget policy went to Parliament on 30th of April. So they have had time to make adjustment in terms of sector ceilings. But I still believe that we have space to adjust that if it can be possible, and I believe it can, because we can still reduce that what we are planning to borrow, especially from the domestic market here in Kenya. Yeah.
Very well. You've talked about a balanced out budget, and I don't know whether maybe we need to borrow a leaf from Rwanda. When you look at their budget, even though it is significantly smaller than ours, you're looking at about 650 billion Kenya shillings compared to what we are planning to spend here. But they don't have any deficit, number one, and they're not planning to borrow to finance its budget. They are banking on the Rwanda Revenue Authority to finance their budget. And so I'm always tempted to ask, what is Rwanda doing that we are not doing? Are we living beyond our means, or we are living recklessly?
Sorry to say, but you have put it very well. We are living, what we are lacking is discipline in terms of budget and how we spend, because our problem, number one, is not revenue problem, is expenditure problem. Whatever we are collecting is enough if we can fill the leakages that we have experienced in terms of, if you check how much we are spending on administration. The other day we saw a figure of 1 trillion, what we have spent on administration. And by administration, I mean the amount we are spending on furnitures, local traveling, and even foreign trips. Those are the things, some of the things we can trim. And when I say we need to borrow zero, we need to have a debt-free budget. The 1.1 trillion, if we had time, I can demonstrate how we can recover that from the expenditure side of the budget. And actually, we allocate the budget to those critical sectors. From the budget, I have seen the allocation to agriculture, which is the backbone and the biggest employer in Kenya, is only 2% of the budget, way below the international, the Maputo Declaration agreement of 5 to 6%. And that is
actually 10%.
10%, yeah. But of course, the last government, we have seen the agriculture has always taken 5 to 6%.
Yeah.
But this particular budget, we are talking of 2% to agriculture, way below even the previous government, and of course the international benchmark. So wastage is one of the areas that's where we need to recover more, and when we recover, we can be able to avoid this debt. So I believe now, if we can, prevent those leakages, we try and even county government, the 500 billion or 490 billion we are giving to county government.
Very well.
We can still recover some more from that by way of austerity measures. We try and avoid wastage even at county government, and that will have a positive impact on our budget.
Good.
As I said, we should not be excited by the size of the budget. We should be more concerned about how much are we collecting and how are we spending whatever we are collecting.
And how prudently we are investing these resources.
Correct.
Engineer Humphrey, I want to hear from you. I know you're very passionate about clean energy, green transition, as well as investment in the energy sector. But when you look at the investment that the National Treasury is planning to put into this critical sector, it was slashed by almost by a half, from 78 billion shillings in the last fiscal year, or in the ending fiscal year, to about 31.5 billion shillings. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's, as it's been ably put by my fellow panelists, the biggest work that we have to do as a nation is fiscal discipline, just like any household. A household that brings in at the end of the day 100 shillings cannot be budgeting for 132 shillings. That means that the 32 shillings have to be sought for somewhere else.
Yeah.
And if I look at the numbers, and as Christine really put them well, out of this 4.8 trillion, if 3.5 is going into recurrent expenditure, that means wages, that means salaries and heavy public debt that you are servicing. The wiggle room is so small. So if the wiggle room is so small, then that means that we, first of all, you say that wisdom is knowing how to call something right. So as we are standing here, I think the biggest understanding we have to take home is that our wiggle room is so small. And if our wiggle room is so small, then what are some of the fiscal discipline measures that we can put in place? If you look at the full fiscal year of that's what's being presented in Parliament today of 2026-2027, with a deficit of 1.1 trillion, I think it's really a national conversation that we should be having around that, with only about 31 billion, as you put it, being able to service the energy industry. So what that means is that as a nation, we need to prepare our minds to really go a little slow and relook into where we can be able to cut fat so that we stimulate development. Because at the end of the day, if you put in these big numbers, 4.8 trillion is really a big number. If you are just mentioning the numbers across East Africa, Tanzania at 2.8 billion, Uganda at rather trillion, Uganda at 2.6 trillion. I mean, that's like almost half of the budget that Kenya is having. So with a jump of about 1.9 to call it 2% from our previous budget, you expect that the rest of the areas in the economy will be able to be stimulated in almost an equivalent measure. So the conversation that I really expect to be had from what will be tabled in Parliament today and across the nation is how disciplined can we be? Because otherwise, even if we had a budget of 6 trillion, it won't really have a big effect to the nation. You'll find that very little is going into development expenditure. We are seeing a big share again being sent to the county governments of almost 495 billion Kenyan shillings. Must we do that? How can we redirect these funds? So we are left with really small portions, and it's sad to say that we're going to see very limited development in the areas that are visible to the eye across the nation. So in as much as we want to invest into infrastructure, you are left with a very small wiggle room that you're able to do that. You want to invest into energy, you want to invest into climate finance and all that, and all these policies that have been put in place. The other day we had the president ably saying that he's opening the door and really removing the excise duty on the electric vehicles and the e-mobility space, and that's why you're seeing a lot of bikes and e-vehicles into the country. But that's just a small way that you can handle it. So I will say, from the numbers that have been submitted today, it's important for us to listen to ourselves and call ourselves out in the right manner to know that we are in a hole and we need to stop continuing to dig.
Christine, I want to go back to there was a finance minister whose name was David Mwilaria. Unfortunately, he left us. He used to say that we need to avoid the habit of borrowing to maintain our lifestyle. All right? Yep. He was very clear on that, and he was a finance minister during Mwai Kibaki's era. But that was before devolution. Today we have devolution whereby the devolved units are going to consume about 500 billion shillings.
Yes.
And almost 85% of these will go into recurrent expenditure. So about 15% will go into development. You also have a very highly bloated government. And Christine was talking about almost 1 trillion Kenya shillings that will go into paying wages and salaries. And so I know there has been efforts by the government to try and trim and rationalize the wage bill in this country, even though we have not been very successful. From where you see it, Christine, are you of the opinion that number one, our administrative governance is very expensive and we need to relook at it from a constitutional perspective?
Thank you, Brian. Certainly, I think it is a discussion that we need to have, because when you look at the numbers that we have, even for this budget, we're talking about 800 billion going into development. However, we have a deficit of around 1.1 trillion. So that just shows you, even from the plain view, that we have 300 billion that will be funded from our deficit and borrowings that will go into recurrent expenditure. And that feeds into what exactly is the administrative expense at the national government, but also at the county governments. Are we able to now balance what we collect versus what we are giving back into the country? Because we need to invest more as a country into being able to grow our GDP so that we are able to sustain ourselves, both at the county level and at the national level. It's interesting that you've brought the discussion about counties, because even as it is, counties get an 100 billion for this term, but then they absorb more for recurrent expenditure than they do for the development budget that they get. It is very rare that they will get to the 30% allocation for
they don't
development.
even get to 20%.
Yes, but in terms of recurrent, they're usually at 85 to 90%. So that is just showing you the exact problem that we're having, that we need to be able to invest more into these systems. And if you ask me, I'd say let's have counties streamline their operations so that they are able to have, let's say, a sector or an area that they're able to grow. So if it's textile, let's have counties that are programmed and are moving towards developing textiles, towards oil, towards infrastructure and all that, so that we're able to now grow, first of all, our revenue, and then we can move into our expenses and our going forward.
As a policy expert, Leonard, please help us understand this. When you look at counties, and last night, there was a breakthrough in terms of arrangements of how much counties are going to be allocated this time around. I think it's about 428 billion shillings. Then you add another 75 billion shillings. And so you're looking at almost 500 billion shillings. By investing all these to the counties, do we really take time to understand how much did they generate for the nation?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. That's an important conversation, and that should be held, because, as you've rightly put it, 428 billion shillings that is going to counties this financial year is quite a bit. And there must be something to show for it. And as my panelists have said, we hardly have anything. In terms of expenditure, counties should, by right, devote about 30% of their allocations to development, which they do not. Most of it goes to recurrent expenditure. So we should be asking why? Why is this? And we should be looking at counties that have been run successfully and asking why the other counties do not benchmark themselves against these counties that have been run successfully. We are talking of counties like Muranga, under Governor Kangata, that have actually raised their own revenues, what we call appropriations in aid. They have revenues that they raise through cess fees, various licenses that they charge to the public, and they're able to actually get above target in terms of what the national government expects every county to raise in terms of appropriations in aid. So what are these counties doing that other counties are not doing? That's the question we should be asking. And yes, again, we should pay greater attention to the way counties use their funds, because if you remember, during the year there was that hullabaloo about governors and the misuse of funds, and how they were shielding themselves from appearing before a Senate when Senate was probing and finding holes in the use of county funds. Yeah. I think the government, the national government, with its investigative agencies, should move into counties, do thorough probing of these county accounts, and charge some of these governors who have been accused of misappropriating public funds.
Very well. I want you to hold your thoughts on that, because I need to go to Parliament, where our reporter Hashim Abdiaziz is on standby to talk to the chairperson of the Budget Committee. Hashim, if you can hear me, what is the chair saying, and take us through that interview?
Parliament buildings. It is a critical day. Few hours from now, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that is John Buddy, who you saw a little bit earlier on addressing members of the Fourth Estate in regards to what is entailing the 4.8 trillion budget, will be presented here before Parliament, of course. But before we even reach there, the Budget and Appropriation Committee of the National Assembly had already conversed with the various ministries and even the Treasury itself on the key areas that the government will prioritize in terms of financing. Who better to talk to than the Chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, that is Mheshimiwa Samuel Atandi. Mheshimiwa, thank you for joining us here live on KBC Channel 1. Your committee, as the Chair, dealt with that particular budget. In terms of the key priority areas where the government and members of Parliament have taken issue with, or they're going to finance for the 2026-2027 financial year, what are these key areas?
Thank you very much. First of all, we are going to have a 4.8 trillion budget. And I would like to summarize the budget before I go into those critical key sectors. First of all, 1.5 trillion of that budget is going to be spent on CFS, Consolidated Fund Services. Basically, payment of interest on public debt. Then we have another 1 trillion which is going to be spent on salary of government employees. Then we have 800 billion which is going to be spent on education sector. Education sector is the largest consumer of our budget. Then of course we have infrastructure. The infrastructure is going to take a large chunk of our budget because, as you know, this government has been heavy on infrastructure improvement, both housing, roads, and all other critical infrastructure that is necessary for the expansion of our economy. And lastly, on health, we have put a lot of resources on health. We have the primary health care, which is basically the primary health care fund, which is the fund that is supporting the universal health care for the people on the grassroots. Money that people who go to clinics, dispensaries in the counties, that money is earmarked to support that sectors. And then we have agriculture. You are aware that this government has invested heavily in agriculture. For the first time, we are having oil inflation, but food inflation has been tamed because of the fruits of investments in agriculture. Fertilizer subsidy will consume about 20 billion. And then we also have subsidy on seeds, which is going to consume about 10 billion. So, in a nutshell, that is how the budget is going to be consumed. Of course, yesterday we finalized our mediation with Senate over the transfers to counties. And again, county is going to consume about 500 billion, because 428 billion is for shareable allocations to counties. But then we have those conditional grants that the national government is giving counties that would push the total allocations to counties to about 500 billion. So in a nutshell, the budget is not huge, as people are trying to say. With a 20 trillion economy like ours, our 4.8 trillion budget is very tiny. It's very tiny.
Yes. But Mheshimiwa, people have been arguing, we have been having an increase of the budget every financial year. But at the end of the day, ministries as well as even counties come back to the National Assembly and in the Senate to ask for supplementary budgets. So if this budget is adequate enough, will we see more ministries and counties coming back to your committee and other committees to ask for more money?
Actually, this budget has grown on the back of debt, public debt only. If you look at the national government expenditure, it is flat. Parliament budget is flat. The only people who have grown, judiciary budget is almost flat, though it has grown by about 3 billion. Parliament budget has grown by about 1 billion. National government budget is flat. Counties has grown by about 13 billion. So the budget is actually flat. So the sector that is taking our money is interest on debt, which has grown from 1 trillion to 1.5 trillion.
And yes. Indeed, Mheshimiwa, also while you're considering...
Talk about supplementary. The supplementary budget, we have just done one this year, a great improvement. In the previous years, we were doing about 2-3 supplementary estimates. And these supplementary estimates, which we processed this year, was basically to cover the monies that were spent under Article 223 on emergencies. Remember, earlier in the year, we had drought situation, which was very bad, then we had floods. So we were basically regularizing those expenditures. We didn't have really high additions in the supplementary estimates. Yeah, so we are running a disciplined budget system And I want to thank the President and the National Treasury for the discipline that they have created in the budgeting process.
And indeed, Mheshimiwa, it's very good you have raised the issue of Article 223, because yesterday the Control of Budget just released a report on how the national as well as the county governments were able to utilize their funds for the first 9 months of 25-26. And one of the major critical issues she raised is the over-reliance of Article 223 of the Constitution, which she says is a major hindrance in the implementation and absorption of the budget. What are your thoughts?
As the chairman of budget who approves expenditures under Article 223, I can assure you that there is nothing irregular that we have seen. When the estimates under Article 223 are presented before us, we normally approve them because they are aligned with the Constitution. So I think the Auditor General needs to tame our aggression. Control of Budget needs to tame our aggression on the way she's analyzing those expenditures. From where we sit as Parliament, those expenditures are justified. For example, money spent on emergencies, on drought. How would any government stop spending money when there's drought? Kenyans will be crying all over the place. For the first time, by the way, you did not see NGOs fundraising to support people who are affected by drought, like in the previous years. We used to see a Red Cross fundraising all over the place. For the first time, they didn't, because the government was responsible enough to address the challenges that occurred because of emergencies and floods and droughts. So I think let us give the government a pat on the back when it is justified.
And also the education sector, as always the committee, you have always sided with the education sector. Given that the education sector will be receiving the largest chunk of your budget, in terms of implementation, what would you like to see from the Ministry of Education in the backdrop of what we are seeing across various institutions? You have seen school unrest, infrastructures, they're complaining the issues of infrastructure. So has Parliament and your committee catered adequate money to address those challenges?
Actually, we need to spend about 1 trillion on education alone. Kenyans people are talking about free primary, secondary, and university education. If we are to do that, we need to increase the education budget 1 trillion. We are doing 800 billion right now. And even capitation, we are not able to fund capitation satisfactorily. There are some small deficits that we are going to look for more resources as the revenues improve. We are going to adjust those revenues. Those are allocations to capitation and some other areas. We need to allocate more resources on education, because education is the backbone, is the foundation. Yeah, and we cannot fire teachers. We are employing more teachers. In this budget alone, we are confirming 20,000 teachers and employing another 20,000 teachers. So I want to say that if resources allow, we should be able to allocate even 1 trillion to education sector alone. Yes.
And maybe finally, Mheshimiwa, given that we're running out of time, I'm being called by the studio here right now. There's a very critical exercise coming up next year in 2027 in terms of equipping IBC with enough resources. Has the committee given IBC what it requested for ahead of 2020?
We have given them enough resources to start the processes. Now there are some things they need to procure now. There are others that they will need money later on. So the ones that they need money now, we have given them resources. Like, for example, the resources for election itself. We'll budget them in the next budget because the election will happen in August. They'll need money to pay for electoral officials. You don't need to budget that money now. We'll budget at the right time. But for now, we have given them enough money to start the process, procuring what is needed now, and then the others will come later.
Thank you so much. That is the chair. Mheshimiwa, thank you for giving us your time. That is the chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee. That is Mheshimiwa Samuel Atandi, just giving us a breakdown, O'Brien, of what they had, of course, appropriated through the committee, which is the Budget and Appropriation Committee, spearheaded by him. But for now, I need to take you back to studio.
Interject. Our reporter there, Abdiaziz Hashim, talking to the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly. This is none other than Samuel Atandi, and of course giving us his side of the perspective in regard to today. Remember, it's Budget Day across East Africa, where Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania and Rwanda will be presenting their fiscal policies for the year 2026-2027. And of course, this afternoon we are expecting the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Bandi to present Kenya's policy on that. issue before the National Assembly, and we have just heard it from the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Samuel Atandi, there, saying that they are ready and waiting to hear what the CS has up in his sleeves to bankroll Kenya's expenditure plan for the coming fiscal year. We are back in studio here. We continue our conversation with critical personalities in various fields. We have here in studio, and they're helping us to put into perspective these numbers. And I'm very much interested in something, in the last question that our reporter Hashim has posed to the chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, bearing in mind that our national elections are coming up in about 1 year from now, and he has asked how much has been allocated to the national or to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. I didn't get a clear answer on that. I don't know whether Kimani, you have any idea how much will go into preparations for the national elections?
Thank you, Brian. Yes, we have elections next year, and it's a very critical project that we will be having in this country, because we are planning to have to hold election and to get the new leadership of the country, and therefore it is critical that we allocate the required budget to facilitate the whole process. I don't have the clear figures, but I know this budget should be 60 billion.
Yes, and it's up almost 144% from the previous one.
Yes.
How much?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read the budget document itself. It's coming to about 26 billion. Let me just confirm that
26
figure.
billion shillings, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the chair of IEBC has been in Parliament before requesting for about 44 billion shillings to help them prepare for the elections.
Yeah, you see, that figure, we know IEBC need to start preparing way before and in advance, because remember, this budget will be running from now up to 30th of June next year. That will be only 2 months to the general election. And we know much of the budget need to be spent way before the D-Day. So it's only fair that we do the allocation. We know they may not get the whole amount that they need this financial year. But of course, we have seen, like last year, this financial year ending 30th of June, we have seen 2 supplementary budgets happening. So we expect maybe next year, the first supplementary budget, IEBC might get some more money. And of course, maybe by the time we'll be getting to next year, the next supplementary budget, they might get some more.
They might get some more.
Yeah, yeah. So it is important. Yeah.
Derito, I want to hear this from you. You know, when you look at our country, 55 million people, with about 20 million people registered as voters, and spending almost 50 billion shillings on an election. Ethiopia, with a population far much bigger than ours, and you're looking at almost 120 million people in Ethiopia. You know, they spent less than 15 billion Kenya shillings on their elections last month. Are we physically when you look at us from a physical point of view, are we indisciplined? Are we flagrant? What is the problem with us? Should we be spending 44 billion shillings on an election anyway?
Thank you, Brian. I think certainly that's a conversation we need to have, because when you look at our current budgeting, the question that we need to now be able to understand is this based on a zero budget that we're saying IEBC is starting from scratch and building up the resources that it needs, so that they're requiring 144% increase in terms of their allocation? Or is it that whatever resources they have, they just need to be able to add on onto that? And that's a conversation that we need to have, because when you look at what you've just mentioned, in terms of the number of taxpayers vis-a-vis the number of people who are actually in the country, which is 50 million, the numbers do not tally. Yeah. Whether this is a case of fiscal discipline at the national level as well as even at institutional levels is what we need to be able to understand and say, these amounts that we are allocating to IEBC, is it for resources that you need for this specific election? Is it for voter registration? Is it for the equipment? Because if we are able to move from a point of you having a budget and doing 144% increase what are the numbers inside that increase for you? Yeah, I think we need to be able to just be able to understand that and be able to also borrow from other countries, such as Ethiopia that you just mentioned, so that we are understanding what exactly is in those numbers, what exactly is going to be the impact, and what resources does IEBC need? Are they new? Are we just developing onto what they had?
Yeah. Just to add on what my sister is saying here, 50 billion in you know, we're talking of 25,000 million voters in Kenya right now. If you do a quick calculation, that would be around 2,000 shillings per voter.
Yeah.
And I feel that amount is on the higher side, given that we know the only item you require there, you know, even if you put the cost of a ballot, printing one ballot, you know, the administration bit of it, the logistics involved in election, I want to agree with you, yes, that amount compared with other jurisdictions is on the higher side. And as my sister is putting it, are we talking of, are we just planning? Are we just, you know, we should be talking of zero budgeting, where we justify every coin from you know, outside the, whatever we spent last time, instead of now building on, you know, the cost we spent, you know, including the wastage that was involved that time. I feel the cost is on the higher side, much as we need to facilitate our elections and to make sure we have free and fair general election from the president all the way to MCA. We need to ask ourselves, and you know, this is what the conversation we are having about austerity measures that we need to implement. We, you know, all the way from IEBC and all other bodies, just to make sure to justify every coin that we are spending. Do we really need to spend? You know, that conversation must continue even after this budget.
Yeah. Before I got to you, Leonard, I also want to hear this from Engineer Indire. You've just come from Dar es Salaam and you are telling me that the level of transformation that you have seen in Dar es Salaam is absolutely amazing. And you're talking about a country which is planning to spend about 2.7 trillion Kenya shillings to develop itself or to manage its affairs vis-a-vis ours, which is spending almost 2 times that figure. But you're not seeing a lot of transformation on the ground. Where do you see the comparisons? Where are we failing, Engineer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Just to state, yeah, if you look at what's visible to the eye in terms of transformation of cities, Dar es Salaam, I'll compare it with Addis Ababa, it's really visible to the eye, and they have looked at different austerity and fiscal discipline measures. So you cannot develop by, let's say, really milking out everything from your tax base. And we look at alternative ways of ensuring that we are able to develop our cities and we are able to accommodate expenditure, whether through private and public partnerships, government-to-government expenditure, so that we are able to support some of these other fiscal needs that we have as a country. So I was just reading the report that was tabled by MP Samatandi by the Budget and Appropriations Committee. And if you look at some of the recommendations, because if you go to page 40 of the same, it's written out a number of non-fiscal recommendations that can be taken. So one of it states that by 30th December of 2026, the National Treasury provides an assessment of the fiscal implications of county governments arising from intergovernmental agreements between national and county governments. So that means that there is opportunity that has been seen where we can take out some of the money and be used for other areas that are really shrinking in terms of fiscal risk as a country. It follows to say that the Auditor General undertakes a special audit of the financial and payroll records of the Public Service Internship Program, PSIP. The audit is intended to address persistent challenges experienced since the program's inception. That means that we already have areas where we can cut the fat. And if some of these, because the recommendations here are really good, and this document is public, so you can go to the government website and read it. So it's titled under Section 5, Observations and Recommendations by the Budgets and Appropriations Committee on the Estimates of Revenue. So yes, we have some of these very brilliant items that have been written here, but the question is, do we have the discipline to do it? Now that's where some of these other countries that or cities that you mentioned, like Dar es Salaam, beat us. Wonderful document, well written out, but will it be judicially exercised?
I know Leonard wants to say something in regard to that, but before you say that, we just want to go to the National Treasury buildings, where our reporter Trevor Ngendo is on standby. He's going to give us a hint of the preparations that are currently underway as we wait to listen to the CS for the National Treasury, CS Bandi, to present his budgetary estimates. Trevor Ngendo, if you can hear me, what do you want to tell us in regard to what is happening outside the National Treasury buildings?
Hello and good morning to you, Brian. We are coming to you live from the National Treasury here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, where all eyes are on Cabinet Secretary John Badi as he prepares to step outside from the traditional exit from his office on the 14th floor at the National Treasury buildings to here behind me, where he'll do the ceremonial briefcase lifting. As you can see behind me, preparations are currently underway. The security has also been beefed up here just hours ahead of the traditional ceremonial exit from this office of the National Treasury. This year's budget is particularly significant because it is the last full budget before Kenya heads into the election cycle next year. And as a result, many are keen watching how the government will balance fiscal discipline, economic growth, job creation and development spending, while at the same time manage debt pressures and public expectations. The Treasury is also expected to unveil a spending plan of nearly 4.8 trillion shillings, O'Brien, just to complement your conversation there in the studio. And this is the largest budget in the country in history, where the government will unveil its plans. As I said earlier, it's significant because if President William Ruto promised anything in his first term as the president, then this will be the budget that will determine its implementation. We've seen the government in this year's, rather than focus on major introducing major new taxes, instead the government has focused more on tax compliance, enhancing, expanding the tax base, among other things, including even targeting the digital space. So that's how the government plans to raise revenue. However, there is a significant deficit of about 1.11 trillion shillings. How does the government plan to fill this gap? Well, through enhanced tax compliance and expanding the tax base as well as the digital space, O'Brien. And of course, later on, we'll also be expecting the Cabinet Secretary to proceed all the way to the National Assembly, the Parliament, where he will, of course, be explaining how the government plans to spend the nearly 4.8 trillion shillings. And just to give you some context, Brian, maybe many Kenyans will be curious to know, what does the briefcase, the ceremonial briefcase, contain? Well, it contains the supporting documents and supporting fiscal state documents that will be tabled at Parliament. Normally, this is usually the finance bill, which is literally how the government plans to raise the money. It is the 4.8 trillion shillings. Look, this time they're planning on borrowing more locally, as well as other enhanced measures to raise revenue here in the country. And this is a tradition. The ceremonial briefcase lift is a tradition borrowed from the British system, where that used to happen at the red ministerial papers and the box on the way to Parliament. And over the years, this has become more than just a container for documents, but rather evolved into a symbol of the government's economic plans and fiscal direction for the coming financial year. So we are on standby here to wait on that. My colleague Alan Aoko is on the 14th floor at the Cabinet Secretary's office, and we also expect him to come later on with more updates, but we are on standby here to bring you more details as soon as they happen. Of course, we anticipate, previously we've seen a lot of some protests in 2025, in 2026. There were tear gas being lobbed here, but this time around, so far, it's quite peaceful. We don't see any sign of that yet. But, well, we hope there would be that. But, well, security has been beefed up so far already. And we'll be bringing you subsequent details as they happen. For now, I want to hand it over back to you, O'Brien, Kimani.
Well, that's Trevor Ngendo outside the National Treasury buildings there. giving us a sneak preview of what's happening there. Interestingly, you don't have so many people milling around the National Treasury building. I tell you what, I mean, I've been around for quite some time. And on a day like this, let's say about 10, 15 years ago, you'd be having thousands of people milling around and lining up Harambee Avenue, waiting to catch a glimpse of the budget briefcase together with the Minister of Finance. Back then, we used to call them that. Unfortunately, everything changed with the new constitution, and you don't see that. I miss those days. I mean, call me nostalgic, call me whatever, but I miss those days. And Kiwara was talking about those days, and trying to compare how budgeting was done like 15 years ago vis-a-vis how it is done today. And it was drawing some wild comparisons. I'm sure you just want to talk about it now.
Yes. Yeah, we you know, even during before the new constitution, as you have said, we used to have finance minister. And I remember those days when we would, you know, we will be on our TV just trying to catch and know what taxes, what would be taxed.
Actually, it used to be KBC.
Yeah, KBC Channel 1. Yeah, this was the... And we were very keen to know what would be taxed. And the budgets was focusing more on production. You know, trying to show what the government is trying to do to protect, you know, local manufacturing, you know, encouraging investment. And that is where now we... through the government policy, actually, from now, those budgets, we used to see things like special economic zone that were meant to encourage and to attract foreign investment, direct investment in Kenya. And they did very well. The economy started generating more, you know, more people were employed, and we were doing very well. I don't know whether this changed after the new constitution, but I think we need to go back to where we were, where now every budget was supposed to be more benefit to the people. You know, they used to choose more development of a debt, like what we have seen now, what we have just discussed. And I was saying, like right now we have a problem with we are expanding our target in terms of revenue, which is encouraging more debt borrowing. Because when we set our target and we don't meet the target, we have seen this year, the budget for last year was 4.1 trillion, but we ended up having 4.6 trillion in terms of the last supplementary budget we did the other day. So a whole 400 billion was added, which, number one, it is not in line with the law. And that money definitely came from borrowing. That's why we ended up, we had planned to borrow 900 billion. So far, we have borrowed 1.4 trillion Kenya shillings. And I think now that in discipline, we need to go back to our original ways and make sure that whatever we are planning to do, we are doing it. And even before we do whatever we have planned, the budget should be very specific on how it is going to, you know, bring more employment, bring more investment, and therefore corporate tax by the companies, and generally encourage and protect the local industry and the local manufacturing companies to make sure we are not getting, you know, they are not running away from Kenya and going to other jurisdictions. We have seen my friend here talk about Tanzania. I remember that time, 10, 15 years ago, we used to do a budget 3 times. I mean, the combination of all other 3 East African countries, that is Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Our budget used to be more than those 3 countries combined. But right now, what are we seeing? We have seen Tanzania, Tanzania and Uganda, now they are past 50% mark. Yes. And they are coming. That should worry us. And going forward, the policymakers, they must be concerned about what are we doing in terms of encouraging manufacturing and generally growing our GDP.
Yeah. Leonard, yes, and even as you respond or you interject what Kiwara is saying, I also want you to help us understand this. When you look at the last 5 years, we've been spending 4.5 trillion shillings every year. The question is this: if you are to look at the Kenyan economy, if you are to look at the Kenyan landscape today, would you see the more than 20 trillion shillings that we have put into the economy?
Good question, and yes, let me answer that question by giving a historical perspective that will cover what CPA David has said and what Engineer Humphrey has discussed. We need to look at where we are as a country at the moment and why we are spending the way we are. And the elephant in the room is public debt. Public debt is the one that makes us spend, rather tax very aggressively, borrow aggressively, because as we have said, we are spending, public debt now is at about 12.3 trillion shillings and growing. I think it will breach 13 trillion shillings soon. Mm-hmm. A lot of this debt was accumulated in the last administration. In fact, now historically, when you look at the way debt has risen, when you look at the days of Moi, our debt was actually manageable in as much as the economy had stagnated. Yeah. Because Moi, I think the public debt as a ratio of GDP under Moi was about 30%. Then we moved over to, which was quite manageable at the time. Then we moved over to the Kibaki administration, and Kibaki grew revenues. He also grew debt, but it was well within, because during Kibaki's tenure, public debt as a percentage of GDP moved to 18%. Then the Uhuru Kenyatta administration took over.
In 2013.
And it grew public debt exponentially. At the time he was handing over to William Ruto, I think public debt as a ratio of GDP had grown to 68, close to 70%, yeah. Which is now what we find, which is the situation that we find ourselves in as a country. We are heavily in debt. Everything we do, I mean, most of our tax revenue, more than half of our tax revenue is going towards public debt in terms of interest and principal, leaving very little
for development.
And
even as you help us break down those numbers, I also want to interject and say this. I mean, Mwai Kibaki, the late, handed over the economy to President Uhuru Kenyatta, the former, and at that time, our debt, our external debt was about 1.6 trillion Kenya shillings. Yeah. The Uhuru Kenyatta administration grew these to about 8.6 trillion Kenya shillings. Yeah. Today, the Ruto's administration has grown 11. This.
No, we are at 13 trillion to be specific.
Today we are 13
trillion. Actually, just to brand to...
We have almost doubled. Is that what you're saying?
We actually have borrowed 4.2 trillion for the last 3 years.
But
4.2. Let me finish. Yeah. 4.2. This year alone, we are at 1.4 trillion.
We want to borrow 1.4.
We have borrowed this the year ending.
Or the year ending on the 30th of
1.4 trillion. Mm-hmm. And our plan in the previous budget, that one ending on 30th of June, we had only planned to borrow 980 billion. So on top, we have borrowed extra outside, the original plan of around 350 billion extra.
And in the incoming year, we are planning to borrow
1.15 trillion.
Yes, let's allow him to conclude his statement. And then we'll go for a break.
Yes, we have, under the Ruto administration, there's been a lot of borrowing, of course, which has now taken us to, as we've discussed, 13 trillion shillings. But look at what that debt is being used for. Under the Uhuru administration, a lot of that debt went into what I call vanity projects. Projects like the SGR, which up to now cannot break even, whichever way you run it, in terms of trains and passenger services, whichever combination or permutation you put on that SGR, we still cannot break even. So that's a vanity project.
But what is the value? What is the value of SGR to the Kenyan economy?
Yes, it's supposed to spur the Kenyan economy in terms of movement of goods from the port city of Mombasa, of course, through Nairobi, onwards to the region, Malaba, and onward into the region.
Are we supposed to make profits for any economy?
It's part of the Northern Corridor. But the thing is, the SGR should also take goods out of the country.
And that's why we are expanding the SGR to Malaba?
Because, as our panelists have said, we have not developed our manufacturing base. There's not much production that has taken place over the years. So we have nothing to send out. For SGR to break even, you need to bring in stuff, push along the Northern Corridor to other countries, but also push out stuff through the same SGR to the port city of Mombasa. It can't be a one-way. It can't be one-directional. It has to be multi-directional for it to be profitable. But we are discussing and saying that the reason why debt has been taken under this Ruto administration is to so that it can smoothen the profile of maturing debt that matured, the debt that was taken by the Kenyatta administration, and that is maturing, and that is putting the country perilously close to debt default.
Yes,
so that debt has been
because
used
we need to go for a break, and then we'll come back so that you can execute your argument. But I refuse to board your train on this premise that railways are supposed to make profit, that railways are supposed to break even.
Can a road make profit?
I wanted to ask, how much does Thika Road, for example, bring, or how much profit does it make? But when you look at it from an economic, from a socio-economic development, it's absolutely huge in terms of how much it has helped the economy to grow. The same thing, we should look at Kenya Airways. We should not look at Kenya Airways primarily from a commercial perspective, but how much tourists is Kenya Airways bringing to the nation?
The pride of Africa.
How much freight is Kenya Airways taking to the world from Kenya, and how much is that translating into Kenya's socio-economic development? I'm not an expert in that field, I'm just a journalist, and so allow us to take a short break, and thereafter we are coming back with more analysis and of course with more commentary on what's happening today in regard to the budget.
The wait is over. KBC Iko Huduma Center. Starting with Nairobi, kupata huduma za KBC imekuwa rahisi. From digital guidance and signet services to booking of commercial adverts and documentaries. Visit our dedicated desks at Huduma Center GPO, Times Square, Makadara, Kibera, or Eastleigh. Tunakungoja hapo. Whether it's a casual announcement or a specialized media solution for your business, we are here to serve you. KBC at Huduma Centers, moving closer to you. Your station, your service. The bottom-up economic transformation agenda is not just a plan on paper.
Manifesto tulioandika na tukauzia Wakenya na wakatupigia kura, sio gazeti ya kufunga nyama.
It is happening on the ground. Across Kenya.
Enda subabogi Moriega Jodhurwa untie Mugani Pamjambo.
In agriculture.
Turkana wameamkia mambo ya ukulima sasa.
On our roads.
Lami black anaingia hapa anagausha hapa. Wacha bana.
In health.
All our patients are in SHA 100%.
In housing.
Kutoka nyumba za mabati kuleta nyumba kama hii ya ghorofa ni kitu ya mzuri sana.
In our markets.
Umetukumbuka sisi mama mboga, shida zetu umezitatua.
And so much more.
It's a good thing the government inakuja mashinani na this is all what we have been requesting.
This is transformation. This is impact. This is delivering the plan. Every Friday on KBC Channel 1.
Are you a talented artist? Or are you passionate about a topic you want to discuss? But money can be very hard to find for an upcoming artist. Don't worry, Studio Mashinani has got your back. Sign up on ajira.co.ke to book a session with our music and video producers across the country. Work on your music, jingles, spoken words, and even podcasts to realize your dream. All for free. Studio Mashinani, Radani Talent.
Welcome back. We're keeping an eye on what's happening at the National Treasury as well as National Assembly. Remember, today, the 11th of June, 2026, CS for National Treasury, John Bandi, is expected to outline government's expenditure plan for the fiscal year 2026-2027 before the National Assembly, and the whole nation is awaiting to hear what is up his sleeves and how different is this fiscal plan going to look like. We're also keeping an eye on the other East African countries of Rwanda, Uganda, as well as Tanzania. In the spirit of East African community, they're expected to unveil their expenditure plan as well today. And so we are looking at those numbers and, of course, and those reports so that we can give you a comprehensive coverage of that report. We also have our reporters on the ground. So far we've been to the Jivaji Gardens, where Jeffrey Wahungu was talking to members of the Bunge la Mwananchi, as well as the National Assembly, where our reporter Abdiaziz Hashim just had a conversation with the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, Samuel Atandi. And of course, we have taken you to the National Treasury buildings, where Trevor Ngendo, our reporter, has just unrolled for us what is happening there as they wait for the arrival of CS John Bandi. In studio, my name is O'Brien Kimani. We're in the company of Christine Derito. She's a tax advisor at Ijiban Tax and Business Advisory. She is on my immediate left. And we also have CPA David Kiwara, who is the man in the middle, the man wearing a brown striped suit. Did I get it right?
Correct.
Very good. He's a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And the man on the extreme left is a familiar face on this show. This is Leonard Kafafa. He's a public policy analyst and a man well versed with issues happening in the aviation industry. Thank you very much, Kafafa. And of course, the man next to Christine is engineer Humphrey Indire. He is he's well versed on matters to do with clean energy, as well as climate financing and energy transition. And he works, or he's the director at Climate Finance and Energy Transaction, giving us a cocktail of their ideas. And of course, doing what we call giving us nuggets of wisdom when it comes to budgetary as well as economic numbers. This is what I call throwing out wisdom recklessly. Can we continue? I want to hear from you, Christine. When you look at the investment that we are going to put in terms of development, and we are looking at about a trillion Kenya shillings, and you talked about the absorption rate. When you look at the absorption rate for the recurrent expenditure, you're looking at almost 100% for the national government, but 70% for the development for the national government as well. And so, what do we then need to do to accelerate absorption rates for development expenditure in Kenya?
Thank you, Brian. First of all, before I even answer that, let us first of all look at what is the percentage of the allocation to development, because the law requires that it be 30% that goes from the budget into development. However, currently we have 29%. So we are a bit short, even in terms of the allocation that is supposed to go into the development part of the budget. Yeah. But going into the details now, I see when you look at general attitude or the general environment, when you talk to citizens, they're asking, yes, you're paying taxes, but you can't see the roads. Yes, we're paying taxes, we can't see the developments in terms of what exactly is the government doing for us. And that is a conversation that we need to have, because for us as taxpayers to be willing to pay the taxes, we need to see what the government is doing with the taxes. Mm-hmm. That's the thin line of accountability. Yep. Is the government being accountable in how it then implements this taxation that it is collecting, the borrowings, and what exactly are we doing with the money that we get? So when we look at the current budget, when you're talking about it being funded, only 800 billion going into development, but from what our borrowings are at 1.1 trillion, a lot of the money is now going back into recurrent expenditure. We need to be able to balance those two so that we have a conversation and we are saying, let us trim down recurrent expenditure and let us invest in development that can be able to now feed back into the Kenyan GDP, and be able to feed back into the amount of revenue we'll be able to collect. Let us invest in our industries, let us invest in agriculture, because when you look at agriculture, it's a huge driver. of our economy. However, its allocation in the budget is very small. When you look at manufacturing and the industry, it accounts for around 20% of the gross domestic revenue that we get from that industry as a country. But what is the allocation that it gets in the budget? That's a conversation we need to have so that we are able to allocate these amounts corresponding to exactly the sector that is feeding the economy. Yeah.
Very well. Let's come back to you, because there was a point you were raising in regards to our debt status and our debt sustainability, and you were raising, you talked about Vanity Legacy Project, and you talked about SGR. Would you want to pick it up from there? Because I know Kiwara wanted to uproot your hair on that.
Yeah, a comparison between SGR and Kenya Airways. Let me start by stating that SGR, comparative to other infrastructure in the region, appears to have been procured expensively. That's what makes it a vanity project, because we seem to be paying twice what our neighbors across in Tanzania are paying. Yet theirs is an electrified rail system. Theirs, I think, handles a lot more cargo than ours does.
No, it doesn't.
It does not. But
we
when
we handle about 38% more cargo
than theirs. But we stand a chance of losing a lot of business to them, because you see they are developing the central corridor, ours the northern corridor.
Yeah.
And if we don't push that last mile to Malaba, so that Uganda can take up the missing link, we may cede a lot of traffic to them.
Yeah.
So that's why I call it a vanity project. And you compared it to Kenya Airways. I say these two are radically different, because Kenya Airways has been undergoing a lot of changes over the years, at least over the last 6 years or so, to bring it up to make it profitable. And we saw it turn profitable in 2024. It registered a 5.2 billion shilling profit for the first time in about a decade. But again, Kenya Airways is hardly a vanity project, even when it does not make profits, because we know that it moves about 5.2 million passengers every year. And that's about 70% of all the tourists or all the visitors who come into the country. They are carried on board Kenya Airways.
Yeah.
We know that it uplifts cargo. And now, more than ever, cargo has become a huge drive of the economy.
But even SGR, transports more than 48% of all cargo at the port of Mombasa
into the hinterland, but we are talking about export cargo, because there are perishables that cannot be carried on SGR. We are talking of horticultural products. We are talking of fresh fruit and veggies. We are talking of seafood. Seafood, by the way, is gotten from Mombasa, but you cannot put it on a ship. You cannot put it on the SGR, or to bring it into the hinterland so that it can go out by air. Everything has to be done by air, because these are perishables, and these are important. Very important, critical aspects of our export industry. I mean,
but
the
almost
revenues
20% of our horticulture is exported through our waters.
Actually, if you look at Jomo Kenyatta, by the way, as a hub in terms of airline or airport infrastructure, it is the biggest export hub out of the continent by volume, bigger than, say than even South Africa. A lot of that cargo is uplifted on Kenya Airways. We actually have a shortfall of freighters.
Yeah.
We have a shortfall of capacity, which Kenya Airways is working hard to address. And where Kenya Airways becomes important is during times of international crisis. For instance, this recent crisis in the Middle East, where we had Middle Eastern freighters suspending their business coming into Nairobi. So we had a bit of a problem, because we use that capacity from Middle Eastern freighters to carry cargo to the Middle East and to other destinations. But because we have been building internal capacity within Kenya Airways, exporters of fresh fruit of fresh produce did not have much of a problem, because Kenya Airways stepped in and it moved, and it was able to fill in the gaps that were left by the absence of these Middle Eastern airlines, which is why I say it's critical, and it's very different, because it has demonstrated that it is profitable. And other than exogenous factors that preclude it from profitability, Kenya Airways can run very profitable, will run very profitable, now and in the near future. So it's very different from the SGR.
When we come back, I would want you to find out, and thank you very much, for unrolling that for us. I'll be coming back to Indira. I would want to find out, when you look at the transition from petrol-powered engines when it comes to vehicles. In February, we saw Kenya launch the National Electric Vehicle Strategy, e-mobility policy. Are you seeing the budget addressing that and helping in the growth of that? I would really want to find out from you. This is when we come back. But for now, we just want to go to Teleposter Building. That is in CBD, Kenyatta Avenue, if you ask me to be precise, where our reporter Wahungu is on standby. He's talking to Kevin Osido, the country director for Government Watch. Wahungu, talk to us.
Well, O'Brien, Kimani, good morning. We are coming to you live from Kenyatta Avenue, just next to Teleposter here. And we continue to gather, perspectives from different sectors, different Kenyans on what they think about the 4.8 trillion shillings budget that is the estimates that are said to be presented at the National Parliament, of course, later on this afternoon by Finance Cabinet Secretary John Badi. Now, one of the areas that is very important about this budget is the county government allocations, the money allocated to the county governments. And of course, we know Senate and the National Assembly agreed just 2 days ago that 428 billion shillings is the amount of money that will be allocated there. Now, we've talked to business people, we've talked to ordinary Kenyans, but now we need to talk to experts to also see what they think about the budget, but also what is being allocated to the counties. And of course, I have Kevin Osido with me here, the Executive Director of County Governance Watch, who is going to help us to understand really the money allocated to counties. Is it enough? Mr. Kevin Osido, welcome to this live broadcast. Of course, you are live on KBC Channel 1. Talk to us about the 4.8 trillion shillings budget that CS Mbadi is about to present in Parliament this afternoon.
Yeah, interesting to note that this is one of our biggest budgets, and we take note of the fact that continuously, as we continue to read the budget, we have what we call incremental growth of budget, particularly when you look at the estimates. And one thing that is quite interesting is how the different sectors, that is ministries, departments and agencies, keep, fluctuating from one being on top, the other following each other. But the education sector has continuously remained being on top. When you look at, for example, this year we are talking about approximately 786 billion. Last time it was about 758, and the education sector still continues to remain high up. And the second bit of it, of course, is the county governments. And we have to be grateful because President William Ruto has indicated his willingness to support counties, and sometimes we in the past had this feeling that the Kenya Kwanza government was not as supportive of county governments as we initially had thought. But if you look at, for the first time, counties will be, pocketing or receiving approximately 428.6 billion shillings. This is an upwards from what we have seen in the past, coming from 315 billion to 318 billion, 350 billion, and then we are just coming from a negotiation with the National Assembly and the Senate to have agreed on 428 billion, which is much higher than what they received last year, because last year they received about 415 billion. Of course, taking note of the fact that this is also largely a negotiated agreement. The law expects that CRA, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, would generate a formula. And remember that CRA had actually proposed 458 billion. When they went to the National Assembly, they were able to defend this particular budget. But if you look at one thing that the country still continues to grapple with, is revenue sources. And most wananchi still believe that taxation is quite high. KRA has, of course, indicated that they are undertaking certain steps to be able to address some of the loopholes. But Wahungu, we must also agree that one of the biggest loopholes that we experience as a country and as a people is corruption. And now, if you talk about corruption, this is both felt by both. It is felt at both levels, national in county governments. But I don't want to get into the details of corruption and how it is stifling resources that therefore are supposed to be, delivering services, or rather citizens using to be able to have services delivered to them. Of profound interest to us as governance practitioners is the counties. So much so that even as we talk about the 428 billion, there is still a huge chunk that will not be accumulated or will not be accrued to counties. And this is a resource that we call pending bills. As we speak today, county governments owe suppliers approximately 180.3 billion on pending bills. This, of course, is an amount that, if properly gravitated, enhanced and picked up from where they are lying. And of course, there are basic political reasons as to why we have pending bills. But imagine if you have 180 billion thrown into county governments. How much can that be able to do if counties today are only receiving 428 billion? So we are convinced that if the National Treasury and all stakeholders can be able to have a very clear conversation around pending bills, of course, not forgetting that we've had very many discussions. Remember that the former Attorney General was once proposed and recommended by the President to lead a committee that was therefore called Pending Bills Verifications Committee. That is Dr. Edward Ouko, who also came up with very progressive recommendations on what we need to do to be able to ensure that these pending bills are not only progressively paid, but that they are fully paid. The second bit of it, of course, is the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget. The recommendations that they've also been given that are also as an expectation of the Constitution on what they're supposed to do, or what counties and even national government, ministries, departments are supposed to do insofar as pending bills are concerned. So these are some of the serious challenges that we still believe that the country has to grapple with, even as we talk about the 4.8 trillion. Of course, it's a huge amount of money, but the main concern is what are some of these revenues that the country is going to be looking at, as opposed to just taxation. And even as I talk about, sources of revenue, at the county level, we also have what we call on-source revenue. And the fact of the matter, Joe, is that counties are not doing very well to be able to enhance and strengthen their own source revenue streams. And I believe that even as we receive these resources from national government, as we retreat back to our counties, we also have to focus on what we really must do to be able to enhance an approximate potential of about 460 billion. And 460 billion, if county governments can be able to, strengthen their streams and pass the requisite laws, because county assemblies also come to the fore insofar as their role and responsibility in passing requisite laws that therefore support the executive to be able to make the collections that therefore amount to the progressions. Because the challenge is that counties generate their budgets, and when they do the budgets, they fail to meet the approximations that they put in the budgets, which, for example, when you say Nairobi County is expecting 40.8 or 42 billion, for their budget, and Nairobi County has a potential of an annual on-source revenue of 12 billion, but actually of 40 billion. But Nairobi County only picks 12 billion. In fact, they're even struggling to be able to get to that 12 billion. But yet they have enormous streams, immense number of streams that the county government of Nairobi City can be able to work through to be able to meet the kind of target that we are talking about. And that applies to almost all the other 46 counties.
Sure. And of course, talking to a cross-section of residents in the city, they also look at, areas like education, they look at areas like health, that they want a lot of money to be, channeled to. So, of course, Mr. Kevin Osido, giving us an expert analysis of just what needs to be done, of course, in the counties. He talked about the need for counties to settle as quickly as possible pending bills, but he also talked about the need for counties to look at on-source revenue. That will be the next way that he thinks counties will be able to generate more so that they can be able to sustain themselves and develop, each and every region of the county. O'Brien Kimani, of course, will be coming back to you. But of course, we're in the city. We will continue to collect as many views as possible from, residents, so that when the budget is presented, we will all be able to understand where we stand. So back to you in studio, O'Brien Kimani.
Well, many thanks, Geoffrey Wahungu. They are talking to Kevin Osindo, the Country Director, Government Watch, live outside the teleposter buildings on Kenyatta Avenue. And by the way, if you're not aware, Kenyatta Avenue is going to be closed from next week for about 6 months to allow for the rehabilitation and the reconstruction of that critical thoroughfare to the city center. And so this closure is also going to affect Valley Road as well as Jakaya Kikwete Road together with Processional Way. So you need to reorganize yourself. Let's back to the basics here. And we're discussing the budget, which is going to be presented this afternoon over the time coming to 11:45. And so we are counting hours. This is going to happen. It's between 2:30 to 3. That's when we expect to see CS for National Treasury John Mbandi heading to the National Assembly to present his speech. We're back in studio here with a team of quality experts who have been taking us through this conversation. Before we went for the break, we were talking to Engineer Humphrey Indire. He's a climate change expert as well as a green financing expert. And so he was helping us understand the impact of removing EV spare parts and EV vehicles from zero-rated to tax exempt. Is that what you call it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and so he was trying to help us understand how does this merge and how does it marry with the Kenya's e-mobility national strategy, which was launched in February. Take it up, Indire.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. That's a very critical discussion that we must, I think, bring to the table. So just going back to the overall numbers, we are talking of a budget of 4.8 trillion as a global budget. And I would like to break down the figures in terms of like what goes into the development area and development financing. 2.8 of that is going into the recurrent expenditures, and a total global figure of about 650 billion is going into the big bucket of development. But the subsector of energy, we are translating that into about 60 to 70 billion. And this is going through the State Department for Energy. Now, that's where the e-mobility policy finds its footing. In February of this year, the Cabinet Secretary of Transport, Davis Chichir, was able, together with other stakeholders, launch the e-mobility policy. And this is just a framework to guide us into areas where we can spur the economy, because we know transport is the critical backbone to development of any country. Yep. So talk of the bus rapid transport systems, talk of the SGR, like what we've been talking about, or the Kenya Airways. And Kenya Airways doesn't go down to the Mama Mboga. It's the small tricycles and the two cycles that go there, the motorbikes that go there. And if you look at the budget that has just been was tabled by the Budgets and Appropriation Committee, the budget settlement, and what's going to be tabled today at 3 p.m., there are some critical areas that really people in the e-mobility sector need to look out for. So the president has already allowed the tax exemption of about 100,000 of the next EVs or electric vehicles that will be brought into the country. At the moment, in total global figure, talking about 35,000 EVs in the country. So that's like 3 times what's already sitting in the country. So that's a very big opportunity right there. And you've seen a lot of cash injection from multinationals, and I would like to spur the normal Kenyan to jump into this space. Let me not call it bandwagon, into this space, because it's a critical area to help us grow the economy from the Mama Mboga point of view. Let me just go down to the smaller granular numbers. So typically, we've seen your normal border rider. Let me use that because it's closer to everybody. Spends about 1,000 to 1,200 shillings a day to move around, and they are able to earn an equivalent of about 1,500 shillings a day or 1,000 shillings a day. Now, by moving to electric vehicles or electric mobility platform, this border rider is able to up his daily income by an additional almost 500 to 700 shillings. Now, that goes a long way to support beyond $1 a day economy. So really this green finance and the green space of the economy is an area that we can look at taking care of the deficit that we've talked of about 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings of this budget that we are tabling today. By and large, right now we've talked of carbon finance and a lot of community projects are being done. Now the beauty of it is that every community project, and this boils down to the Wanjiku or the Mama Mboga who sits on the ground. So they are able to come together as groups, as chamas, as border associations, as village groups to put together projects, and they're able to get external financing. Then external financing will mean that they are other philanthropists who are able to put in or inject money into the economy that will otherwise not have done if the government wouldn't have put in a policy or a guideline to support that. So with every philanthropy money that comes into the country, the government is able to take up to almost 35% that will go back into supporting this gigantous budget that has been put in place. Yeah. And you've just mentioned this is Kenyatta Avenue that's being upgraded. We are looking at the bus rapid transport that wants to be put up in Nairobi. We are looking at this government EV fleet that the government is doing this through Kenya Power. We are looking at local content. Now, let me just explain something here because it's seated in a granular detail in the government in the budget that will be read out, but fully spelled out in the electric mobility policy framework. Is that if you were able to manufacture your tricycle or your EV vehicle, electric vehicle locally, and up to about more than 15% is local content, you're able to get tax incentives. So there are other companies around, a company like Kibo Africa, who are pushing that almost 35%, and that has given them a lot of leverage, and you're able to go down to the Mama Mboga. So in as much as the government, the budget globally might not be speaking to this, there are other ways that this not direct to the eye way of financing the budget will help us. Yeah, so that's how I can look at it, and great opportunity lies there for the Mama Mboga and Wanjiku.
I mean, if you're just joining us, you know, we're winding up this conversation, and we've been around here since 10 in the a.m. and time now is 9 minutes to the hour of 12, and so we have to wind up. But before we do so, I want to give each one of you 2 minutes to tell us the bad and the beautiful in the budget today. And I'll start with you.
The bad in the budget is the unpredictability of the tax code.
Mm-hmm.
If they can make it predictable, then it will be good for Kenyans, it will be good for investors, specifically VAT.
Mm-hmm.
And my pet subject, of course, is aviation.
Yeah.
VAT being levied on aircraft parts, and aircraft themselves and the maintenance should be obviated from the tax code so that the aviation industry can project and plan for the next 10 years without having that VAT input affecting them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the bad about the budget. The good about it is that it seeks to, it has expanded spending on education. It has expanded spending, I think, on SHA. And it has expanded spending, it has expanded disbursements to the county. So whether those revenues will be used appropriately now is a totally different conversation. But that's the good about the budget.
Very good. Yeah. Leonard, thank you very much. Let's go to Kewara.
Thank you. You know, a country budget is a very critical tool in any regime, in any government. Let me put it that way. Here in Kenya, all over the world, and therefore it is good that we have a budget that is realistic. So that one, we must have a budget. But what we are saying, before asking for more taxes from Kenyans, we must ask ourselves what happened to what we already corrected the last year, and even this year ending this June, because somehow Kenyans feel that every budget is leaving us worse than we were. So that question must be there. My concern is more about the debt, because I still hold the opinion that this country should not be borrowing any other extra cost, any other extra coin, because whatever we already have, we have already accumulated more. We are talking of 75% of the GDP that we have borrowed. And the more we accumulate, and without growing the denominator, that is the GDP, the more we are living at a worse position. So my final one is that we need to borrow less, we need to have less wastage, we need to do more agriculture, we need to do more health, and we need to do more education. And that's the only way we can guarantee ourselves that this country will exist tomorrow. Kenyans will, earn more and live a better life as we progress.
Very good.
Yeah.
We go to Indire.
Yeah. Just to close it out, we Africans, and I'll close with an African proverb. So when a bird jumps on a rope, it plays or dances to the rhythm of the rope. Now, we've been given a report will be read out today, and we'll be delighted to hear what the budget statement fully is. And the good in it is that there are opportunities, and for people in the construction area, for people in the e-mobility area, the budget has outlined, and you can go down into the policies in terms of areas that we are to invest. Now, the part that we need to have a conversation on is the predictability that the budget reading still leaves as not answering, and the crowding out of local lending. So I believe if you are to source for funds right now, is in the next 1 year, it's important that probably you not focus at the banks, because that might not be the area where you'll get the best revenue or the best return for your investment in terms of borrowing money. So by and large, I think looking forward to the conversation, and let's have a national conversation guided by national ethos when it comes to spending of the monies that we'll be able to collect from the exchequer.
Very good. Dorito.
Thank you. I think for me, I'd look at it in terms of three things, basically. One would be the administration and the administration of taxes and revenue collection vis-a-vis accountability for how we are spending those taxes. So as my panelists have said, what they're actually mentioning are the principles of taxation, and we're talking about accountability, predictability, and these are things that we saw in the medium-term revenue strategy, but we need them implemented so that going forward we are able to see if something is in the strategy and it's a policy paper, then it is then being translated into how our finance bills are coming up or how our acts are coming up. For the other aspect, I'd say, when you look at the current finance bill, what I'd talk about as the negativities in that bill is the powers that are being given to, let's say, the Revenue Authority to issue agency notices to taxpayers and collect revenue. Yes, I know it's a bid for us to collect more revenue as a country, but then are we trying to balance that off with ensuring that taxpayers have a right to justice and processes? For my last aspect, I'd be talking about what we are saying is the use of this money. If you're going to be borrowing, let us use it for development. Let us not go into funding recurrent expenditure. And then again, when you're looking at that premise that you're using to borrow, if you're going into domestic borrowing, what is the impact on the mwananchi, into SMEs, and how are they being able to now access the same funding that government is now going to be getting? So that competition might be a problem for going forward for the citizenry, and we'll be waiting to see whether the National Treasury will have a solution for that. Yeah.
Very good. Gentlemen and a lady, thank you so very much indeed for the last 1.5 hours, actually almost 2 hours. You've been here with us, helping us understand and putting the budget into perspective to help people understand really how this budget is going to impact their lives and how this budget is going to impact Kenya going forward. Remember, we have our reporters on the ground. We have Abdiaziz Hashim, who is at the National Assembly. And so we should be going there so that he can hand us over to the Darubini, not Darubini, but no, let's go to Abdiaziz first, and then we'll come back and conclude from here. Abdiaziz, if you can hear me, please take it up.
With this particular wall-to-wall coverage of this particular budget of 2026-2027, you do remember today it is a crucial day, not only from the government, members of parliament, but the country at large, just to see where the government has prioritized in terms of ensuring that adequate resources are sent to all those critical sectors that the government is funding, from education to health to agriculture. Let me continue to, of course, chip in the minds from members of parliament right now. I'm being joined by none other than a very familiar face, that is Mwengi Mutuse. Mheshimiwa, thank you for making time for KBC Channel 1. We're currently live, Mheshimiwa. For the last few months or so, the members of parliament have been able to interact with critical areas that requires funding. Do you think you as members of parliament have done enough to ensure critical sectors in the country are adequately resourced?
First and foremost, thank you very much for having us. As you may be aware, I'm a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, and therefore I sat through the budget making process. We are looking at a budget of about 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings, out of which 781 billion, the largest allocation, is going to our education sector to fund free primary education, free secondary education, TVET, to fund the Higher Education Loans Board, an increase of the amount, and also the scholarships, basically capitation to our universities. Because as you know, our education is our most critical resource to develop our human resource, but also to equalize both the poor and the rich. We are also looking at funding productive sectors like agriculture. We are putting about 18 billion shillings to subsidize fertilizer. You are aware that 3-4 years ago, fertilizer was going for 7,500 shillings. And His Excellency the President said we cannot continue funding, subsidizing at the level of consumption. We must subsidize production. We have put now 18 billion shillings for purposes of subsidized fertilizer so that farmers in this country can continue accessing quality fertilizer at 2,500 shillings. We also have our health reforms that have been ongoing. And part of it is that under the SHA, the Social Health Authority package, primary health care, which is the health care from dispensaries, health centers up to level 3, is supposed to be free. But we have been having a funding gap. This year we are putting about 18 billion shillings to ensure that healthcare at those levels, up to level 3, is free of charge. We are also putting about 5 billion shillings to ensure emergency care. If you are aware that the Constitution says emergency care is when you go to an hospital and you have had an accident, you have had an emergency, you are supposed to be treated without being asked whether you have money or not. There is a package now under SHA to take care of that because somebody must pay for it. We have put 5 billion shillings for emergency and critical care. Very important for me, when I came to Parliament, I brought a motion for the recognition and remuneration of village elders. And you remember that that motion was approved by Parliament, taken up by the Ministry of Interior, and last year His Excellency the President made a pronouncement that following my motion that was successfully debated and approved by the National Assembly, beginning in this budget, we have put 3.9 billion Kenya shillings so that village elders who are at the bottom of the pyramid of national administration and who interact with citizens in terms of service delivery will now begin to get some stipend from government. So as overall, this is a budget, number one, that is going to all parts of the country. You are aware that in the past we have budgeted as a parliament, as a National Assembly, but the budgets have been skewed in terms of allocation. We have ensured that this budget goes to every part of this country. Number two, we are ensuring that projects that have started continue to completion because we do not want to start projects and then they stall. There were roads that had stalled. We have been providing funds for them to continue. There are new road projects that have been started. We have provided enough funds to ensure that they continue to completion. We are also putting a lot of money into youth and youth activities. The National Youth Service, the programs of Nyota, and other youth-oriented programs. We have put money so that our young people can begin to have benefits, both those who want to enterprise and those who want training. We have also put money for internship at the Public Service Commission and across the different sectors so that we move forward. You are also aware this is an election. We are preparing for the next elections. And so that we prepare for the next elections because our stability is determined by our democracy. And we want to grow our democracy such that when we conduct elections, they live up to the constitutional test of being free, fair, and accountable. And to do that, we must resource the IEBC. We have done that. This budget, there is an increment to the allocation for IEBC for election preparedness. There are also other organs of government including the security sector that have a role in elections. They are also financed so that we can begin to prepare for that. Equally as much, to grow our economy, we must have a predictable and efficient system of dispute resolution. For investors to come here, and even for local investors to have confidence that when you have a commercial dispute, it will go to court, it will be adjudicated fairly, it will be resolved within a record time. To do that, you have to facilitate the judiciary, number one, to be properly staffed in terms of judicial staff, magistrates, judges, all the way from the High Court to the Court of Appeal, so that disputes have enough judicial staff to handle them, and support staff also who assist those judges. We are also putting money in the judiciary to ensure that that is done, that justice is served, and is served expeditiously, and is also served in a manner that is fair and impartial. So in short, this is a budget that is supposed to ensure growth. This is a budget that is supposed to ensure continuity of government programs. This is a budget that is supposed to ensure all sectors that require funding get the funding that they deserve.
And indeed, Mheshimiwa, of course, you have talked extensively on where the government is going to, of course, invest all these monies. But as members of parliament, you've talked about critically what is going to happen next year, which many Kenyans are waiting for to see what happens next year. In terms of the resources, IBC has been talking about purchasing new KIMS kit, new materials. But at the end of the day, you heard even yourself as the committee were talking about how expensive our elections are. So in terms of compromising or how expensive elections are, will you be giving IBC all it requires?
This is an issue, as you are aware. I am also the Vice Chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and therefore we interact daily with the IBC. We have looked at this issue, and we have requested for an audit of the existing KIMS kits. The danger and why we have made the decision that IBC needs to be funded. You do not want a kit to be deployed in a polling station and the kit does not work. Because if the kit does not work, it creates suspicion that the elections will be rigged or are being rigged. And therefore, it is better to, from the beginning, following expert advice from people in that sector of IT and ICT, so that IEBC can have well-developed working KIMS kits across all polling stations. In terms of software and everything, up to date, so that our elections are conducted efficiently. We have asked the IBC, we do not want even the presidential elections results to take 2 days before they are announced. If the results, at the time when counting starts at 5 p.m., in 2-3 hours, results should start streaming in, so that by midnight, we know who the winners, especially for the presidency, are, so that there is no anxiety in the country, and so that Kenyans can know that the amounts of money they are investing in terms of improving systems at IBC is also being put into proper use.
And now there is a crisis within the education sector. You have seen a lot of unrest within the institutions. Maybe as a member of parliament, and of course what this budget is going to address. Yesterday we heard from the cabinet secretary himself, that is Julius Migoso Gamba, on how the government is going to ensure that these issues are addressed. I'm sure you're a member of parliament. You know your constituency. The main issue that these students are raising is infrastructural challenges. Have you addressed that in budget?
Well, I am not exactly sure how infrastructure helps in terms of students either going on unrest or not going on unrest, because I have seen very successful people who land under trees. But be that as it may be, we have provided monies for school infrastructure. You are aware that the primary funding for school infrastructure, other than the ministry, comes from the National Government Constituency Development Funding. The National Government Constituency Development Funds are utilized to the greatest extent in terms of our education sector, both in terms of supplementing the cost of education through bursaries, but also in terms of building classes, renovating classes, both in our primary and secondary schools. And we have provided enough funding for the National Government Constituency Development Fund. At the ministry level, we have also provided funding for infrastructure, so that across the country, we do that. And you are aware that over 20,000 classrooms are already completed under the JSS program. When this administration came in, there was uncertainty as to where JSS is going to be domiciled. JSS did not have proper infrastructure in terms of classes for grade 7, grade 8, grade 9. So 20,000 new classrooms have already been built to make sure that the JSS starts from a certain footing. And we are continuing to provide that funding so that we ensure, going forward, all our students learn in an environment that is modern and in an environment that encourages their learning and that mentors them to be the professionals and the leaders that we want them to be in future days.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, and thank you for making time for us here on KBC Channel 1. I know I need to release you so that you can go inside the chamber. Thank you. That is Mheshimiwa Mwengi Mutuse just giving us a breakdown of what the government will be doing with those particular resources, 4.8 trillion. Of course, we're trying to also get a number of MPs. In just a few, we'll be speaking to the former chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, that is Mheshimiwa Ndidi Nyoro, in just a few. But for now, back to you in studio.
And there you have Abdi Aziz Hashim coming to us from Parliamentary Precinct. You heard me right. And of course, giving us a breakdown of what to expect from members of Parliament, plus more. Remember, he's stationed there and he's catching all the events that are taking place there. Remember, Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury John Bandi is expected at 3 p.m. to present the National Expenditure Plan for the year 2026-2027 fiscal year. In studio, we've been here for the last 2 hours talking about nothing else but the budget, looking at the good as well as the ugly that is in the details. My team of experts, brilliant team, but we have to wrap it up so that we give way for Kurunzi Mashinani. But before we do so, let me get my glasses off so that I can address you. You know for sure that this evening, the FIFA 2026 World Cup is happening. It's taking place in the United States, Mexico, as well as Canada. The opening match will be taking place at, let me read this because it's in Spanish. This is Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. And the match is between South Africa and Mexico. You know what? KBC is going to beam, and I repeat, the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation is going to beam these matches live from Mexico City, Los Angeles, Atlanta, to all the cities in Canada. We are going to be live from these places because we are the official broadcaster for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. We have always been your true sports partner. We are not relegating this position. Will continue to be. And so you had better stay tuned for all those matches. And remember, we're also going to be live with the budget this afternoon. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been a pleasure having you with us. And Sheila Kayaro is waiting for you on the other hand so that she can unwrap the budget for us in the Swahili language. Have a good afternoon.